30 years. That is not just a mortgage term. That is a quiet life sentence most people sign without ever feeling the weight of what they just agreed to, because the bank presents it as normal. The realtor smiles. The papers look official. The monthly payment feels manageable. And suddenly, a decision that should have triggered alarm gets dressed up as adulthood. That is where the trap begins. Not in the interest rate, not in the paperwork, not even in the house. The trap begins in the moment your mind accepts 30 years as reasonable. Because once something feels normal, you stop questioning the hidden cost of living inside it. And that hidden cost is not only money, it is time, it is mental passivity, it is years of believing you're moving forward while financially standing in the exact same place. Most homeowners never realize this. They think the mortgage is just another bill. Electricity, insurance, water, mortgage, just one more line item. But a 30-year mortgage is not a bill. It is a behavioral contract, a long-term agreement between your current habits and your future limitations. Read that again. Every month you pay the minimum, you're not simply sending money to the bank. You're confirming a pattern. You're telling your brain that this pace is acceptable, that this delay is normal, that this debt deserves 30 years of your life. And the dangerous part is that you rarely feel the damage in one dramatic moment. It leaks slowly, quietly, almost politely, which is exactly why people tolerate it. Because humans don't resist what hurts slowly enough. They adapt to it. They decorate around it. They call it life. And one day they look up, 10 years gone, balance barely moved, thousands vanished into interest, and they feel something they cannot quite name. It is not just frustration. It is delayed recognition. The realization that progress was happening in appearance, but not in substance. And that realization stings harder because nobody warned them that financial stagnation often feels like responsibility while it is happening. That is the invisible mistake. People think they are being disciplined because they pay on time. But discipline without acceleration can become organized delay, a powerful looking routine that still keeps you trapped. And most people never ask the uncomfortable question, what if the mortgage was never designed to be paid in 30 years by someone who was mentally awake? Because maybe the real issue is not the mortgage itself. Maybe the real issue is how easily the average person surrenders to the timeline they were handed. And once surrender becomes routine, 30 years stop sounding absurd. They start sounding normal. And that normalization is expensive in ways the bank statement will never show you. There is a man, call him Daniel, 38 years old, stable job, wife, 2 kids, bought a decent suburban house because that was what successful adults were supposed to do. Nothing reckless, nothing dramatic. Everything looked responsible from the outside. And every month Daniel made the payment, on time, no excuses, no missed deadlines. He felt proud of that, like he was handling life correctly. But there was something quietly corrosive happening beneath that routine. Daniel stopped thinking of the mortgage as something to eliminate. He started thinking of it as something to coexist with. That shift sounds small. It isn't. Because the moment debt becomes furniture in your mind, you stop trying to move it. You simply learn how to walk around it. And Daniel did what millions do. He adapted. Raises came, tax refunds came, bonuses came. Small side income appeared, but every new dollar found 100 new justifications. A vacation because the family deserved it. A newer SUV because the old one still worked but looked tired. Kitchen upgrades, streaming subscriptions, weekend spending. random conveniences that never felt large enough to be dangerous. This is where most people miss what is happening. Financial failure rarely arrives wearing the face of one terrible decision. It arrives disguised as harmless comfort repeated for years. Daniel was not irresponsible. That is what makes this dangerous. He was average, and average is where financial time gets quietly buried. Because average people do not feel urgency when the payment clears. They feel relief. And relief is a terrible long-term strategist. Relief says you survived this month. Urgency says you are still losing years. Most people choose relief because urgency is psychologically uncomfortable. Urgency asks for confrontation. Relief asks only for sleep. So Daniel slept. Not physically, financially. And sleeping financially is one of the costliest habits a person can have because nothing looks broken while your future is being diluted. Then one afternoon, he opened the amortization schedule. Not because he was curious, but because a friend had just paid off his house early. Daniel expected to see manageable numbers. Instead, he saw something nauseating, years of payments ahead, an ocean of interest, a horrifying amount of money scheduled to leave his life simply because he had accepted the slowest possible path as default. And that was the first crack. Because until then, Daniel thought he had a mortgage. What he actually had was a 30-year permission slip to stay financially unconscious. Daniel couldn't stop staring at the numbers. The principal looked almost untouched. The interest looked insulting, and the years ahead looked less like a payment schedule and more like a slow extraction of life. That afternoon ruined something inside him, but not in a bad way. It ruined the illusion that paying normally meant progressing normally. Because those are not the same thing, not even close. You can be consistent and still be strategically asleep. You can be responsible and still be financially passive. You can make every payment on time and still donate a decade of your future to a timeline that never had to be yours. That realization is deeply uncomfortable because it attacks a comforting identity. The identity of I'm doing okay. Most people cling to that identity for years because it protects them from harder questions. Questions like, why have I accepted the minimum in areas that determine decades of my life? Why do I negotiate aggressively over groceries but surrender passively when it comes to long-term debt? Why do I celebrate income increases while keeping the exact same slow financial behaviors? Those questions are not mathematical, they are psychological. And this is where most mortgage conversations go wrong. People search for clever hacks, refinancing tricks, interest rate comparisons, bi-weekly payment calculators. Useful, yes, but incomplete, because none of those tools matter if the underlying mental software remains untouched. A person can know exactly what to do and still never do it. Why? Because information does not override normalized complacency. People do not stay in 30-year mortgages because they lack calculators. They stay because the minimum payment quietly sedates ambition. It removes urgency. It creates the dangerous illusion that time is handling the problem. But time is not handling it. Time is charging you for your passivity. That sentence hits hard because it should. Time is charging you for your passivity. Not the bank alone, your delay, your comfort, your unwillingness to create pressure where pressure is needed. Those are expensive too. Daniel began replaying the last 7 years in his mind. Tax refunds that disappeared, raises that got absorbed into lifestyle, bonuses turned into purchases, small financial openings that could have been used as weapons, but were instead used as anesthesia. That is a brutal distinction. extra money can either become acceleration or sedation. And for most people, it becomes sedation because comfort is emotionally easier than compression. Compression requires saying no. Compression requires friction. Compression requires behaving temporarily unlike everyone around you. And humans hate temporary social discomfort more than they hate long-term invisible loss. Think about that. People will sacrifice 10 years to avoid looking intense for 2. That is not a finance problem. That is a perception problem. Daniel saw it all at once. He did not need more income first. He needed a different relationship with acceptable delay. And that changes everything. Most people ask the wrong question. They ask, how can I afford my mortgage payment? That question keeps them trapped inside maintenance mode, because maintenance is about surviving the structure that already exists. But survival does not create acceleration. The more dangerous and liberating question is this: how do I become emotionally incompatible with a 30-year timeline? That sounds subtle. It is not subtle at all, because once a timeline becomes psychologically offensive to you, your behavior starts reorganizing itself. You stop seeing extra payments as optional generosity. You start seeing them as acts of self-rescue. You stop asking whether a few hundred extra matters. You understand that repeated interruption of principle is not a money move. It is a time theft reversal. Because principle is where the years hide. Most people obsess over the monthly payment because it is visible. Very few obsess over the years being silently compressed because that result is invisible in the moment. Humans are notoriously bad at sacrificing present comfort for invisible future compression, which is why the mortgage often wins. Not because it is mathematically unbeatable, because it is psychologically patient. The mortgage knows you will get tired. It knows lifestyle creep will whisper louder than long-term discipline. It knows most raises will disappear into conveniences. It knows most households operate with a "we deserve this" reflex stronger than a "we can end this faster" reflex. That is why paying off a mortgage in half the time is rarely about one giant sacrifice. It is about repeated acts of anti-normal behavior, tiny but strategic disruptions, redirected refunds, captured bonuses, intentional underliving after raises, micro decisions that tell the mortgage, you do not get my full timeline. Because the true payment being made is never just dollars. It is years of mental bandwidth, years of monthly obligation, years of background pressure sitting quietly in your household. Every principal reduction is not merely lowering debt. It is shrinking the psychological territory this mortgage occupies in your life. And suddenly the conversation changes. This is no longer how do I pay a house. This becomes how quickly can I stop donating decades to normalize delay. That question wakes people up. And once you wake up, the minimum payment starts to feel offensively passive. Daniel did something that looked small on paper, but psychologically it was enormous. He stopped treating extra money as free money. That was it. No dramatic second job, no overnight miracle, no guru formula. Just one brutal internal decision. Nothing unexpected would leave his hands casually anymore. Tax refund, captured bonus, captured small freelance income, captured expenses that could be delayed, tiny lifestyle upgrades that felt harmless, questioned. And this is where most people become uncomfortable because it sounds restrictive. But only at first glance, because what Daniel was actually doing was not restricting his life. He was refusing to let randomness consume strategic opportunity. There is a massive difference. Most households leak acceleration through casual permission. We can afford this. It's just this once. We work hard, we deserve it. These phrases sound harmless, but repeated long enough, they become the language of timeline extension. Because the mortgage does not care whether your detours feel justified. It only cares that they keep happening. Every small enough redirection of money away from principal is a silent vote for a longer sentence. That is one of the hardest financial truths to swallow. Because people want long-term freedom without short-term behavioral aggression. They want compression without discomfort, acceleration without saying no, an early payoff without temporarily feeling different from everyone around them. But that is not how timelines bend. Timelines bend when repeated normality is interrupted, again, and again, and again, until the years begin collapsing in ways that looked mathematically impossible only because the person was behaviorally passive before. This is the real shift. Paying off a 30-year mortgage in half the time is not primarily an income event. It is an identity event. A person who pays the minimum for 30 years behaves one way. A person who attacks principal relentlessly behaves another way. Same salary sometimes. Same city. Same inflation. Different relationship with tolerated delay. That is the uncomfortable lesson hidden beneath all the calculators and amortization charts. Many people do not need a better mortgage. They need a lower tolerance for passive decades. Daniel understood that. And once he did, every extra payment stopped feeling like sacrifice. It started feeling like recovered life. That is a completely different emotional engine. Years later, Daniel looked at the same house, same walls, same driveway, same front door. But it felt different because the weight behind it was different. The mortgage that once looked permanent was gone. And what shocked him most was not the money saved. It was the years he could feel he had taken back mentally. No monthly background drag. No invisible 30-year contract humming behind every decision. No quiet acceptance of someday, just space. Financial space, psychological space, breathing room that had been unavailable for years because debt had occupied more than his bank account. It had occupied his timeline. And maybe that is the part nobody says clearly enough. Long debt changes the way you imagine your future. It teaches patience where urgency is needed. It teaches coexistence where elimination is possible. It teaches minimum movement while life keeps moving at full speed. So the question was never just how do you pay off a 30-year mortgage in half the time? The deeper question is this: how many years of passive delay are you still emotionally willing to normalize? Because the bank can offer 30 years, but only you decide whether your habits quietly accept them. Think about this tonight, not when the next statement arrives. Tonight. Where in your financial life have you mistaken consistency for acceleration? Where have you been paying without truly attacking? Where have you been surviving a timeline instead of compressing it? Because sometimes the most expensive thing a person owns is not the house. It is the quiet habit of accepting slow loss as normal life. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. If this made you rethink more than just mortgages, stay here. Because some debts are made of numbers, and some are made of patterns. The second kind is usually the one stealing your life.